So Alvin Kamara
Yes,
last
sir, I've
year
heard of
finished
him.
as RB1 on a points per game basis, in large part because he had 6 touchdowns on Christmas Day. So I'm not trying to say that the numbers were distorted, but up to that point, I think he was RB3, maybe going into that Christmas Day miracle. So he had 15 games last year. In 15 games, he had 187 carries. Not a lot. That's
Right.
like, I think he had one game. Actually, I know he had one game with at least 20 carries last year. But where he was remarkable was he had 16 rushing touchdowns and 83 catches plus 5 more receiving touchdowns, Matthew. You have him at RB3. I have him at RB3. Daniel has him at RB3. RB4, excuse me. His ADP is RB3. This is where he belongs. I mean, there's a case for him as RB2, but I think he is 2 in most optimistic projections, 4 in most pessimistic projections. The only thing that makes you a little bit concerned, there's only one thing.
There's one thing. Yep, go for it.
Last year, in the 4 games Taysom Hill did start, here were his catch totals. Remember, I told you he had 83 catches in 15 games last year. So that's over, 15 times, 5 gets you to 75. So that's 5.3 on average, okay?
He's had 80 or more catches 4 straight years.
81, 81, 81, and then 83 specifically.
Yeah.
Amazing. 0 catches, 1 catch, 2 catch, 7 catches in the 4 games with Taysom Hill as a starting quarterback. Now, those 7 catches were the final game that Taysom started, and one of those games was the game against Denver where they were starting Kendall Hinton, where it wasn't even really a game, right? It's a little bit of an outlier. But we saw how much more reliant the Saints were on him as a pass catcher when Drew Brees was out there.
Sure.
If Taysom Hill is a starting quarterback, are you slotting Alvin Kamara down to like RB4 or 5 behind the likes of Ezekiel Elliott and Derrick Henry and maybe even Saquon Barkley?
Well, not me on Saquon, you know that. But
Okay.
but yes, I think there's an argument. Like if Taysom Hill were named the starter and you took him at 5, I don't think I look at you crazy. Yeah. And honestly, if you took him at 6 and you took Kelsey ahead of him, also don't look at you crazy. Not what I would do. Again, he's my number 3 running back. But yeah, 14 in those 4 games that Hill started, a 14% target share. You average 4 targets a game. And, just whatever, Hill's instinct, when the play breaks down, Hill's instinct is to run. When the play broke down for Drew Brees, his instinct was to dump it off to Alvin Kamara, right? And there was some designed, passes to Kamara as well, but just Hill's instinct is at least last year, was to run, was to tuck it and run.
That's fair, yeah.
And by the way, it worked. He's obviously very athletic. So that is a slight concern. But I think ultimately, again, we just talked about this. Sean Payton is one of the most creative offensive minds in football. I don't think there's any disagreement about that.
None.
He's a great offensive football coach, a great coach, but obviously one of the better offensive minds in football. And as he approaches this year without Drew Brees, his first year without Drew Brees on the roster, and he's looking around like, all right, how do I maximize talent? It gets to 41 pretty quick.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's going to be, it's definitely possible that the 80 catch threshold is a little bit more out of reach if Taysom Hill's a starter, but I don't think it's going to crater to the point where Alvin Kamara has 25 or 30 catches, right? Maybe it's more like 65 as opposed to 80. But when you're deciding between Derrick Henry and Alvin Kamara at the top of the board, those are the kind of things that can make a difference, especially when you factor in that touchdowns are the hardest thing to predict year over year.
Yeah.
Except for generally with those 2 players. I guess both of them, but especially Derrick Henry, right?
Yeah, I mean, the knock on Derrick Henry is, do the wheels fall off? He's had a massive workload for the last couple of years, and right. But then you're also like, oh, that's right. Derrick Henry is built different than every other human on the planet.
Correct. Yeah.
I mean,
6'4", 250 pounds. Right. Not normal.
He just his DNA. It doesn't seem realistic that his DNA and my DNA are in some way similar. That somehow we were part of the same species.
Well,
right.
that part technically true.
Other than that, not
whatever.
Really. Yeah. Derrick Henry is just built differently than the rest of us, and so I agree with you. But that would be the knock against "quote unquote" Derrick Henry. I have the 5th pick. I'm doing a expert super flex. I'm doing an expert league draft right now. I'm in the middle of it's a best ball with a bunch of other fantasy analysts. Our friend Jake Seeley is running it.
Okay.
And I had the 5th pick, and Derrick Henry dropped to me. I'm like, what?
So who was the surprise before him? Zeke Elliott?
Zeke.
That's not that big of a surprise to me.
It wasn't that big a surprise, but I was surprised. But Kamara and Zeke, I was just like, okay. Bingo, bango.
In a minute, we have to talk about Michael Thomas, and of course, defying his insight will be invaluable there. But just quickly, before we have a couple of live reads, Latavius Murray, Matthew, you think he has standalone value this year, even if Alvin Kamara is on the field? Because we know, as an insurance policy, he's one of the 5 most important in the entire league, because when he's been the man, and it has not been frequently in New Orleans, but when he has been, he's been remarkable.
Yeah, I really like him. Look, I have him at, I'm the highest on him. I have him running back 39. He's actually being undrafted in 75% of ESPN leagues, and I'm inside my top 40. So I think there's a couple of things here. First off, I think the injury of Michael Thomas and the fact that my expectation is Taysom Hill's named the starter in New Orleans means they're going to go run heavy this year. They're going to be they're going to be a lot more run heavy than we've seen previously under Drew Brees. And so I think when you go run heavy, you're going to see Kamara, but I think Latavius Murray gets enough run that he becomes flex viable in 12-team and deeper leagues. At least, if you're not playing a wide receiver there.
Very valuable. Just a valuable piece.
Right. And by the way, just again, right, one of the most valuable insurance guys out there, because like in the couple games that Alvin Kamara missed, like guys, 2 years ago, guy was a top 5 fantasy running back.
I think of A.J. Dillon as a souped-up version of Latavius Murray. Like,
sure.
More talented at this point of his career. Is going to have some games where he rushes for like 80 to 100 yards. If something happened to Aaron Jones or Alvin Kamara, those guys would be inside our top 10 every single week. All right, we're talking about Michael Thomas in just a minute. But
and that's by the way, just if you read the Draft Day Manifesto, that's a whole big thing about like getting guys like that, because it's not enough about having guys that can be good. It's about knowing when to start those guys. When Alvin Kamara is out, you know to start Latavius Murray. When Aaron Jones is out, you know to start A.J. Dillon. Getting guys like that you know will produce, and knowing when to start them is, I think, a key part of the end of your draft.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming, sports, and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.